So welcome. This is Can We Do That? Variety and Accessibility. Today we're going to be looking at that from the training from the back of the room principles and perspective, as well as going and looking at how broad that word can be, how it can reach and stretch outside, as well as how our TBR principles and activities can be used in different realms to increase accessibility. So before we jump into that, I want to talk to you a little bit about agreements for an accessible place for learning. So some of these may look familiar. The big one that I use in all of my courses is the right to pass. This gives all participants the right to skip over an activity or to send me a side note or hand me a sticky note if we're in class and just say, hey, I need a moment. I'm going to take a pass on this one. Or is there some other way I can do this? Or is there another activity? Sometimes just like when we were in grade school, there's things where you go, hey, can I just be the helper and hand out the paperwork? Absolutely, we can find ways to make it work. The other up here is mistakes and disagreements can be beneficial. Everybody should have the freedom to make those. Sometimes our biggest learning things are from discussions that we have or mistakes that we make. Be curious. I always say it's the best thing to come into every situation with a curious mind and attitude. And then the last one up here is ELMO. So in all of our TBR courses, we use ELMO. So ELMO is to help us as facilitators or trainers when we may just get so excited about a topic and we're just rolling along. And sometimes we have to have somebody tell us, enough, let's move on. So feel free to give me that gentle nudge if needed to say, hey, that's enough. Let's just move on. And so in chat, if you guys will drop in there any other ideas or things that you use to make an accessible and safe learning space. Make sure my students know that they can reach me outside of class. And Nicole loves the mistake one. And taking care of self, absolutely. And we encourage that. If you guys need to take a phone call, just make sure you're on mute. If you need to take a break, step away, any of that kind of stuff, make sure in any training situation that you're taking that time. So a little bit about me before we venture on. So my name is Laura Mergley. I am currently working for the University of Little Rock here in Arkansas. And I work for a division called the Mid-South Training Academy. And our focus is training the child welfare staff for the state of Arkansas. Prior to being pulled into that, I did nearly 20 years in the field, frontline, doing the actual work. And now I have transitioned into training and mentoring, doing coaching. And our model is one that incorporates classroom, in person, in the field coaching. So we're utilizing all kinds of different skills and approaches and activities to really engage them and their brains on all the different sensory levels and to help them best their practice. Next, I want you to drop into chat what you commonly think of when you hear accessibility. Patients, yep. Just making sure everyone can participate as they need to. Absolutely. Yeah. So Matthew hit the first and most common right on the head, right? So we hear about physical accommodations, movement limitations. This is where our brains naturally go immediately. Yet so many of our activities are for movement, especially things such as stand and share, gallery walks, pop-ups, walk and talks, pair shares, which virtually is awesome. Sometimes pair share can be, hey, everybody grab a partner and walk around the room. So thinking in ways to alter that, thinking about our activities and ways to make them more accessible to all. And one thing I think is interesting is open space. So open space has the law of 2 feet. This was introduced by Harrison Owen, who's a member of the organization advocating for open space technology. For those of you that don't know, the law of 2 feet states that if at any time during a meeting or an event, a person feels that they are neither learning nor contributing, they have the responsibility to themselves to get up and move and use their 2 feet to move to something interesting. And I would challenge that to use maybe a law of mobility. So something similar, but more so that if at any time during a meeting or an event, they feel that they are not learning or contributing, that they have the responsibility to themselves to move to or engage with something interesting, make themselves into a spot where they feel that they are learning or contributing. So movement limitations can go so far beyond what quickly pops into our head, but there are other limitations. Some of those are language and or verbiage. So hand gestures can be an interesting topic to talk about with accessibility. So that the peace sign, for example, here in the United States, the peace sign is a pretty casual. We see it in photos. People sit lifted up when they're leaving, saying it's sometimes a way to say goodbye. But in other places, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, depending on which way you face your palm, it can be an insult there. So if you use it, make sure you're putting your palm outward, like in this picture. Inward is sometimes not a great thing. Another one we think of is the okay. So when we have the 3 fingers together and then our 3 up. In the US, this means okay, perfect. It's another one of our positives that we use. Or in places like Brazil, Turkey, parts of Europe, this too can be an offensive or obscene gesture. And one of the others that I've really enjoyed, and I am 100% guilty of asking my students to give me this for understanding checks, thumbs up. So in the US, thumbs up is good job. Okay, I've got it. I got the understanding. However, in other places, such as the Middle East, parts of West Africa, South America, this can be seen as an insult, pretty close to flipping someone off. So here again, common things that can have other meanings and be limitations and block accessibility, right? One other one that we know, and it's becoming seen as rude more universally, is pointing at someone, right? We use this a lot when we're selecting people in in-person classes, right? Yep, you or you. Well, in a lot of cultures, that's rude or seen as accusatory or aggressive. So we have to kind of think of other ways to pick and choose and get people's attention, right? Some of the other things that we talk about when we're talking about accessibility with language is common phrases. So when I think about common phrases that sometimes slip into my talk when I'm in an in-person training and virtual too, is things like eyeball it. Well, eyeball it may not be understood throughout all the cultures and destinations that training from the back of the room is used at this point. Hit the ground running, right? Some of us are very literal thinkers, and that can be a very confusing statement. Circle back, I will circle back to that. That's a great point. I'll circle back to it. Low-hanging fruit, I've heard, can be confusing. On the same page, and things like local type phrases like pull yourself up by your bootstraps. So the easiest way to make this more accessible is to use some quick references. So if it relies on slang, uses some form of sarcasm, depends on a gesture, or is very what I would call American casual, then it's best to maybe just replace it with plain speak instead. The last one for quick under language and verbiage is jargon. Now we all know there's a lot of jargon and there's a lot of letter abbreviations that we get to throw around in our worlds, whatever our arena of expertise is. The world is full of acronyms, and so much so that so many acronyms have multiple meanings. So I can be talking about one thing that is this, and it may mean a completely different thing to everyone else hearing those words or letters. So the last thing I want to talk about is if you will drop into chat a few of your favorite hobbies. Nicole TBR. Yeah, climbing. Matthew gives us a list: playing guitar, writing, concerts, and sports games. Mine are like running and reading, right? So did you know that hobby or hobbies is not an internationally known word? Meaning that as we go through this and we're training and we're asking people to do things like, well, describe your hobby, or rename yourself as your name with your favorite hobby, or for us, working on a hobby map. Just the word alone, hobby, can be a stopping point for some because it's not a familiar word. In other ways, putting people with amazing functioning brains on the spot with, hey, tell me what your favorite hobby is, when that may not be a familiar thing, can be a freezing point and can feel like being put on the spot. More internationally known and acceptable terms would be things like free time activities or things you enjoy, pastimes, interests, leisure activities. And we have to be aware that there are some cultures that really don't engage in hobbies. They don't see the point in having a hobby. You're either working or you're at home. And the other piece with this is sometimes when we're training and we are putting out these things like a hobby or asking for things pretty quickly, those of us with neurodivergent brains can be needing more time to think, to process, to look for meaning, to really see things from a different angle, to ask clarifying questions. And so having those quick asks and asking them to create something that to us would be like, oh yeah, just tell me how to do your favorite hobby in like 4 steps, can be pretty stopping in all of their progression and understanding, and may limit them from gaining what you're trying to teach with that activity. So we're going to play a little myth and fact here. So what I would like you to do is, on a piece of paper or a sticky note, in one corner, draw a little star, or a big star, or a colorful star, whatever your star looks like to you. So I'm going to put up little phrases on the screen one at a time. And as you read them, if it is a fact or it is yes, accessible, then go ahead and hold your star up. If it's not a fact, if it's a myth or it's not accessible, then just don't have to do anything. So only one little movement. All right, let's try this out. So our first one, walk and talk is an accessible activity. Breaks in courses that note for participants to move as their bodies need. Yeah, ooh, nice stars, awesome, okay. Here's another one about sketch it out. Right? Could definitely be more accessible to some. Accessibility only applies to people with visible disabilities. A web or data hunt is an accessible activity. Deep thoughts. Half and half. All right, we got, yes, this can be, right? There can be limiting factors here as well, depending on if you're doing an international virtual, there may be technology issues, as well as timing, all types of things that can make that kind of a, sometimes it is accessible, sometimes it isn't. How about a 1-minute movement reflection? Awesome. How about 3 before me? That one can be tricky, right? So this can come in handy with those of us who more so have the neurodivergent brains. It can help us, give us time to think, to ask questions, to talk to our group. Yet sometimes 3 before me can do the opposite. It can put people at that point where they feel asked upon or shocked because they've been asked a question. So there again, if no one asks for help, everything must be accessible. Okay, good. No one moved. Okay, except Matthew, he's laughing. Okay, myth and fact games. Are they accessible activities? Guess it depends on the hand gestures and things we choose, right? Okay, accessibility is everyone's responsibility, not just leadership. So, and writing on the ceiling is an accessible activity. Yep, it can be, right? So for those of you who may not know, so writing on the ceiling is thinking of things and then you're writing it on the ceiling, or writing on a sticky note and placing it on your ceiling if your ceiling's reachable, or miming that to some extent, right? So you'll also notice some of these activities may not be familiar to you. These are all activities that you can learn about when you take a Training from the Back of the Room course, or reading the books, looking at articles online and blogs. So Training from the Back of the Room, really briefly, we'll go through and talk about that. So Training from the Back of the Room is a course based on a book by Sharon Bowman. She has a couple. And there's websites and a great community that you can join and engage with. So 2 of the main things are the 4C map framework for training design. So that is here. So it has 4 pieces, 4 C's. So connection, which is our connecting learners to learners and learners to the information that they already know, priming them to learn new. Concepts, which is learners gaining new information in multisensory ways, keeping it in short chunks. And then concrete practice, so learners actively practice or engage with the new information, merging it into what they already know. And then conclusions, which is usually committing to a plan to move forward, wrapping up, celebrating, really simply put. And the other thing that is so important with TBR is our 6 learning principles. So they are demonstrated here by these lovely elephants very naturally. So movement boosts focus and energy and retention. Even a brief physical activity can improve brain function and help reset attention. Writing helps encode information in the brain by activating motor memory and focusing learners to process the meaning of it. Verbalizing or talking about what we've learned helps organize thoughts and deepen understanding through active recall. Our brains retain visuals more effectively than text alone. So dual coding and the picture superiority effect mean combining images and words to boost our memory. So our brains can only hold so much at once. So short, focused bursts of content reduce cognitive load and improve learning. So we got to keep it short. And then novelty, so that different. Novelty captures attention. So the brain filters out repetitive information, but it tunes into what is new or unexpected. So these are our 6 learning principles from Training from the Back of the Room. And again, if you want to dig in further, we have courses, virtual and in person, and they are scheduled worldwide now, which is so very exciting. So the next thing I want to talk about, we've talked about some of those most common things that pop right in when we talk about accessibility. I want to stretch us a little bit and talk about accessibility outside of what we usually think of, and then help to discuss how Training from the Back of the Room principles can integrate into that. So accessibility can look very different for different ages and experiences in life. Breaking conversations and learning into shorter chunks with visuals and engagement for children can be very helpful. Having movement breaks built into activities, meeting them at their communication level, so their developmental level, explaining what is happening and why, and offering multiple ways of sharing. So talking, drawing, writing, scaling, magical questions. So accessibility for children means that they can understand what is happening, feel safe, and have a real way to share their voice, even sometimes when they aren't as verbal as we would like. So we're going to try a little activity that's called the 3 houses. You will grab a piece of paper. You can use the same one with your star, or you can use another. Your finished project, you won't have to show it to anybody. So you can go as personal as you want or keep it more imaginative, whatever you would like to do. So what I'm going to ask you to do is on your piece of paper, either draw 3 houses, or you can just section your paper into 3 sections. Mine are not super equal, but again, mistakes help us learn. All right. So once you've done your houses or your sections, I want you to pick one of those 3. And in that house or section, I want you to think about a child or a youth that you know, or just one you can picture in your mind. Or you can do the following props for yourself as well. This is a tool that's accessible for all ages. Some of us have more fun drawing our thoughts than writing them out. So whichever section or house you want, I want you to think about a moment in that child's life or your life and write what is going well in that moment. So what are the good things in that moment? Go ahead and write or draw those in that house. Okay, perfect. So pick another one of the houses or sections, and in this section, draw or write in that moment in their story, what are your worries? What are you worried about? And okay, and then in the last section or house, I want you to write or draw what it would look like if you woke up in the morning and the worries were gone and whatever goal that was current in that moment was achieved. What would that look like? So think of this as your house of good things or house of dreams. So in child welfare practice and in training with them, the 3 houses is an activity that can be used in many ways and to gather information from all ages. So some of our younger children, they're doodling and we're labeling what that is. Older kids, they can write lists. You can also do it just on a piece of paper, so it's very accessible. I still have a giant bag of markers and crayons and stickers and giant poster boards in my car that still move everywhere with me because I was definitely that person who was on the ground at their level, coloring and drawing to figure out. And in one case, over time, 3 houses can show progress in a case. It can show that nothing has changed. They can become a great communication tool, even for older kiddos. Sometimes you can get to the point where you walk into a house and they hand you a house that they've drawn that maybe is a conversation they can't have in the home, but they can hand it to you and you can look at it and kind of know from what they're drawing, what they're experiencing, or maybe that there's something that, you know what, we need to go get an ice cream cone. So accessibility for children and youth can be all about getting on their level and letting them express at their own ability. This works with adults too. Some adults are much more comfortable drawing out their thoughts and feelings than talking through some things. So it's definitely a net added accessibility point. Here's an example of what I've been talking about. So a little background here, you're going to see 2 different ones. The first one is from our 6-year-old. This is a family who they had gone through a recent divorce. Mom works a lot, and when she's not working, she's sleeping. unfortunately, due to addiction. And then dad at this point was in a rehab hospital, and mom had not been forthcoming with the 12-year-old, who's 3 houses you'll see in a minute. And so the 12-year-old was left at home to care for our 6-year-old, and he got really worried about his dad and tried to go see him at the hospital. And when he did that, the 6-year-old tried to make dinner for herself and ended up pulling a pot of boiling water off the stove onto herself. And so she got pretty badly hurt. So this first one is our 6-year-old. So when we talk to her, she tells us that the good things are her relationship with her and Greg. They spend a lot of time together. She just started school. Getty is her favorite food. And that she, down here at the bottom, is talking about how she's a big girl and she can make her own food. So when we ask her about her worries are that mom sleeps all the time. She has to play alone. She draws dad sitting at a table with some bottles. So talking about dad drinking. She's concerned she isn't seeing dad or granny, who's dad's mom right now. And then she drew her hand where it got all kinds of ouches on it. And then we ask her, okay, so if tomorrow you woke up and all these worries were gone, what would that look like in your house? And for her, that means no more ouches and lots of love and all the people that she loves sitting around one big table eating Getty, because you got to have the Getty to have a good life. And then we look at her big brother, Greg. This is his. So Greg is 12. So he is at that stage where, he's not going to draw like a baby, but he's willing to talk through some things and write some things out. So you can see differences here, how in his house of good things, so what's going well, he's talking about how mom says he's very mature, how he has this amazing dad, he's an amazing big brother. His worries, he's very verbal about his worries, concerns with the divorce, and that it's all his mom's fault. He doesn't always want to be in charge of his sister. He doesn't get to see his dad. And then similarly, when we ask him, if tomorrow you woke up and all the worries were gone, what would that look like? What would your dream day look like? And for him, it's about safety for himself and his sister, being able to see his dad, his mom not using pills, and in a 12-year-old's mind, to not have to take care of his sister and to be able to have a life. So some of the differences with ages, but this is a tool that you can get on the ground, engage with them with, or sit at a table and gain a lot of information in a short period of time. And you're also getting them active. You're having the conversation, you're getting them drawing. You can have movement while you're doing it. You can walk around the house and do it. There's all different kinds of ways to really engage those different multi-sensory things while you're doing this. And it helps you as the worker retain that information as well, because you're hearing it, writing it, all of these things. So next I want to talk about, we take that and we can use it and the principles to use training from the back of the room and accessibility within overall child welfare practice. So with families engaged in the child welfare system, accessibility can mean all the things that we've discussed. It can mean watching your hand gestures, watching your facial expressions. It can be meeting them at their level, learning if there are language barriers, learning if there are developmental things that we need to worry about, how they think. But it reaches so much further than that. It's systematic accessibility, seeing the families as the experts on their own lives, respecting the values and ideals while being really clear and concise and consistent about the process and the journey that they're going through. So using learning principles to engage during contacts with them throughout the life of the case and the time that you're working with them can help really reduce confusion and frustration and added stress. So in child welfare, most of the time when that first knock happens or when you're going back into a home so many times, it's not the best time in their life, right? And that in and of itself limits accessibility, limits the willingness to work together, and can cause added stress. Just like think about holidays and your family's coming to visit. And it's not, I mean, it's great. You're seeing them, you love them, but it has an added layer of stress. So it's the same in a way when you know that you have someone who's coming to look at your family and assess for safety and risk and all of that. Even when you know it's an announced visit and they're coming, it's an added layer of stress, and that can really hinder accessibility and progress that you're making. So we are training child welfare staff to utilize principles and a framework within their visits to help be consistent and to help the families kind of know what to expect if they're meeting with the same person or different people from the agency multiple times. So when training out in the field or role playing in the office, I tend to work with them and mirror a framework. And I've adapted the 4Cs framework to do that. And it helps them to really be consistent. So let me walk you through kind of a home visit setup. So thinking back, we have our 4Cs. So connection, content, concrete practice, and then conclusion. So connection. So in child welfare, part of that connection is priming. You're really wanting to look at history and know the reason why you're there, have a goal for that visit. So having the objective or the main content and what you want to accomplish in mind before you go knock on that door. Just like coming into any training or creating a safe place to learn, we want to access it from a curiosity standpoint, as well as we're constantly assessing for safety and risk. Just like in a training, we're constantly trying to look at people's faces and see if they're engaged and do all that stuff. So it's similar. So in an investigation stage, they would come into the home, be honest about why they're there, ask about prior experience with child welfare, and discuss how this is going to be different and what the objectives are. So you're having that connection, you're showing them that you're there to be helpful to them. You're trying to put some juxtaposition between what may have occurred if they've had prior experience and what the system is now and how it's going to work. For subsequent visits, so this is when you go back or in longer term cases, starting the visit with connecting it to a goal that you set the last time you were there or an overreaching goal that the family has, and connecting with all of them, ensuring that you're greeting everybody in the home, which not only helps you stay safe because you know who all is there, but helps them know that you remember their names, you know who's there. It reinforces that connection that you've already created. Moving into the concept. So when you are there, you're doing small chunks of time with each family member. You can go between them, go back and forth, not overwhelming them and staring them down for a long period of time, breaking that visit into chunks, right? Use the time to assess and to talk about immediate issues, discussing positives, and really focusing on making sure that they have an understanding. So lots of checks for understanding, breaking those pieces into small pieces, being sure to notice all the progress and celebrating the smallest things. In my 20-year career, you would be surprised how many times I walked into a home and said things like, wow, you have 3 children and all of them have all of their fingers and toes. Tell me how you've done that. That is a huge accomplishment, because really it is. So an example is an environmental neglect situation. So something has been called in where the home environment is in a state where someone feels it's unsafe for the children, whether that's animal feces in the home, whether that's broken glass, electricity that doesn't work, all of these things. They can be accepted and they go out and have to work with that. So talking about that and hazards and risks depending on the age of the child or the youth in the home, and really doing that education piece with them. Safety in and risk in an environmental neglect situation can be very different for a toddler that's crawling versus a teenager who can walk away. So really doing that education piece with them. So then we get into RC3, which is concrete practice. So in an investigation, this is really walking around the home with the family, helping them identify safety issues and risks, helping them see why this might have been called in. Sometimes families won't identify an issue until they are helped to see it. And that can be for multiple reasons. It can be a generational learned situation. It can be just a situation in life, but coming at it from a curious place and asking, so tell me why this is the way it is. Tell me, help me understand. Is there a historical or a family tradition or a cultural tradition that I don't know about that you can help me learn about, and then I can help your family. For subsequent visits, similarly, you're walking around the home, you're looking at progress, you're helping and taking that time to assist them with a task. So sometimes, going back to our environmental neglect situation, sometimes it's that the family has become so overwhelmed over time that they don't know where to start, or someone has never taught them how to start, sometimes some things like when your kitchen gets to a certain point, it can be really overwhelming to get back in there and clean it up. And so sometimes it's just easier to let it go, or to go buy paper plates and do all these things. So sometimes it's slowing down, it's making it into short chunks and getting in there and being willing to start the task with them, making sure that they have all the items that they need, and really practicing that with them and starting small chunks, teaching how to build chore charts if they have like preteen, teen kiddos, even younger sometimes. It's never too early to start a little chore chart of responsibility and build that in. And sometimes us as adults need that too. There's certain chores that I definitely don't want to do. So as we go through, we're doing all this and we're training and we're teaching staff, child welfare staff, to meet them where they are, to engage with them on their level where they are, and then work forward. And helping the families to choose those starting spots can be so beneficial too. Like if one of their big goals is to have family dinner once a week together, but you can't see the table that they want to eat at, although they tell you it is there, that might be a good spot to start. Okay, so over this weekend, can we clean just enough so we can see the tabletop? So you can put dishes on the table. I'll come back on Monday and we'll talk about it, see how you did, and we'll set a next goal, breaking it into those small attainable things for them and showing them how to start that process. And then the other thing that we do, which aligns with our 3 houses for our children, is the 3 questions. So this is a form made by Andrew Trunell and his friends through Signs of Safety. And here in Arkansas, they have adapted the safety organized practice model, which incorporates signs of safety, structured decision-making, solution-focused questions, and a whole lot under that umbrella. But so when we go out and we talk to families, we're asking these 3 questions. They may sound similar to questions you heard earlier. What's working well? What are we worried about? and what needs to happen next. So we're looking at the positives, where they are, where they've come from already. What are we worried about? So what's the current issue for them, as well as like the division. The division has bottom lines. And then what needs to happen next? So what does this look like that we're headed to? How do we get there? What are those steps? And so it mirrors our 3 houses with our kiddos really well. We're training them to ask open-ended questions and solution-focused questions. I have always encouraged, you'll notice the 0 to 10 at the bottom. This is on here to hint at scaling questions. So staff are encouraged to utilize these to see where the family is. So they're engaging and rating their own progress as well. So these can be questions like, on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being no progress at all and 10 being this room is the best I've ever seen it, where would you scale that? And so then you would have each family member give a number and have follow-up questions like, okay, so you said a 4, what kept you from being a 3 or a 3.5? Or on the flip side, all right, that's awesome. We've come from 0 to 4. What would get you to 4.5 or a 5? What can we do next? And that can really help. And kiddos are able to do some scaling of their own, which is really great and can be helpful and can help parents, caregivers, see progress through their kiddos' eyes. We like to ask exception questions as well, which is things like, okay, tell me about a time when the houses didn't look like this. What was going on in your life at that point? Or ask me about, or tell me about the last time you guys all had dinner together. So really engaging them and helping them picture what it was like and what the conditions were and what they want it to be again can be very, very motivating for families. And then we go into, for every visit, every contact they make with a family, we encourage and recommend, and it's usually required by policy and procedures, to have a next step, an action plan before they leave. So we're celebrating any progress, we're lifting up those struggles, we're acknowledging the positives that the kiddos have seen. We're always doing time for goodbyes. We're not letting anybody not have that chance to have closure and conclusion at the end. And then we're empowering and assisting families to create that next plan. Where do we go from here? What's one more step that we can take? So with every visit, we're building on what we've learned. We're revisiting and experiencing new growth, new things. And then we have to make sure that we have a clear understanding with the family of any timelines and expectations. Sometimes this is writing it out on the wall or a big sticky note and putting it where they can see it, so that they know what the expectations are, that they're pretty clear, and that everybody has a next step. And then, of course, for our training purposes, then we talk about documentation, because one of the big recurring things in child welfare is if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. So we use some of that conclusion time with them to really help them capture everything they've done in each visit, and we write it into their 4C framework for them. So this is to really help you see accessibility on a broader scale, as well as to help you see how some of the principles can be used outside of a training, usual training model. So, so the next thing I want to do is to give you 7 minutes. I want you to grab that definition of accessibility that you wrote at the beginning when you first came into the session. You have no limitations on resources. You can use Google, AI, that beautiful gray matter that you have. And I want you to think about work, personal arenas, where your expertise is, and update your definition of accessibility that you created at the beginning of this session. All right, so I'm going to share with you my definition of accessibility. I will let you guys read that over. And then feel free to take stuff from it if there's items that you didn't have in yours, or if there are items that you have in yours that I don't have here, please feel free to drop your definition in chat, or go ahead and unmute and share those out. Matthew says, accessibility means designing learning with real people in mind so the widest range of people can succeed without having to explain themselves or ask for special treatment. That's awesome. Yeah, because we know asking in and of itself can be very, very hard for a lot of us, right?
I like that you have the safety part in there, feeling safe. That's something that I definitely missed from mine that I think I will add. I kind of landed on making sure content is inclusive and usable by everyone for all common barriers, including physical, communication, and digital. But
That's awesome. Yes. I love that I love that you put the digital part in there. It's especially with our forms of learning and interaction these days, it's hard to think of it all sometimes. And yeah, so feeling safe is something that's hard. Like, we as trainers cannot promise or assure everyone that safe space. But we can help to the best of our ability to help them feel safe or feel brave enough to interact and share to the best of their ability. Made me think of yesterday during TBR Fest. Someone shared with us that there are members of our learning community who will turn their cameras on in breakout rooms, but may not feel comfortable doing it in the larger group. And that was very insightful and something that digitally thinking I hadn't really thought of until I was in a breakout room and there were more faces than I had seen in the bigger. And I was like, oh, well, it's so great to see you. And then it was very neat. It's a very neat experience that we would not have had if not for TBR Fest. So, all right. So you guys have shared your revised definitions in chat and verbally. So the next thing is really our conclusions. And so we're talking about action planning. So my hope is that you leaving the session will be open to engage in future discussions regarding how accessibility is bigger and broader. And that definition and the impact of it is so much more than just those visual things that we think of or movement limitations that we think of. And secondly, that you've practiced several training from the back of the room skills, heard a little bit about the principles in the 4C map, hopefully piqued your curiosity and gained knowledge of how TBR skills and principles can reach outside of a training or learning environment. And the last thing I want you to do, so what's next, right? So I want you to think of and commit to one thing, just one, that you can change or update in your work or personal arenas of expertise. And once you've done that, I'm not going to force you to share them. You're more than welcome to drop them in chat if you want to, or to unmute and say them out loud. But more so, I want you to write or draw a reminder on a sticky note or a planner page or whiteboard, whatever you use to really help you get your creative and accessibility driven juices flowing to help you remember that commitment. Matthew says he's been very intentional about physical accommodations in his classroom, and he will intentionally reflect on what meaningful accommodations I might be missing in my classroom environment and adjust accordingly. Very nice. That's very long. I hope you have a giant sticky note.
So mine is around jargon and terms. I never noticed how many different things I say that are, very, I don't know, regional, I guess. Um, so it's interesting, coming across that being pointed out to me. So really making sure that my language is accessible, and then I'm counting that as a half one, so I really have one and a half. And really looking at our curriculum and the In It, Eyeball It, and the hobby map. Those are two things that jumped out at me as, maybe we need to rename those and give some alternative, descriptions on things. Really commit to that.
Beautiful. I love it. Thank you both for sharing. So, this is what I have for you all today. Our happy little elephant here at the end is dancing and jiving with us because we've made it all the way through. And I thank you so very much for your time and for engaging in this accessibility journey with me. And my contact information is here if you have questions or want to chat more about child welfare or training from the back of the room, any of that. Please feel free to reach out at any time. Thank you all so much for your time today.